What happens when one of Hollywood's most level-headed actors reaches his absolute breaking point on live television? What we're about to show you is the moment Jason Bateman completely lost his composure during what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview on The View. This wasn't just any ordinary celebrity meltdown. This was a calculated takedown that left the entire studio in stunned silence. Before we dive into this incredible footage, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what you think really triggered Jason's explosive reaction. It started like any other Tuesday morning on The View. Jason Bateman had been booked to promote his latest Netflix project, arriving at the studio with his usual calm demeanor and that trademark dry wit that made him a favorite among talk show hosts. The pre-interview chatter was light, professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone who had done hundreds of these appearances over his decades-long career. "Jason, welcome back to The View," Whoopi Goldberg said as the cameras rolled, her warm smile setting what everyone assumed would be the tone for the entire segment. "Always a pleasure to have you here." "Thanks for having me, Whoopi," Jason replied, settling into his chair with that easy confidence that had made him a household name. "Great to be back." The first few minutes proceeded exactly as scripted. Questions about his new show, behind-the-scenes stories, the usual promotional circuit routine that both the hosts and Jason could navigate in their sleep. Sarah Haynes asked about working with his co-stars, Alyssa Farah Griffin inquired about the filming locations, and even Sunny Hostin chimed in with questions about the show's themes. Then Joy Behar leaned forward. "Jason, I have to ask," Joy began, her voice carrying that particular edge that regular viewers of The View knew meant trouble was brewing. "Your show deals with some pretty heavy political themes. I'm curious about your personal political leanings. Are you one of those Hollywood liberals, or do you lean more conservative?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. This wasn't the kind of territory that promotional interviews typically ventured into, and everyone in the studio could feel the shift. Jason's smile flickered for just a moment, a barely perceptible change that only the most observant viewers would catch. "Well, Joy," Jason said carefully, his media training kicking in, "I try to keep my personal politics separate from my work. I think audiences appreciate when actors don't lecture them about how to think or vote." "Oh, come on," Joy pressed, waving her hand dismissively. "That's such a cop-out answer. Everyone in Hollywood has opinions. You can't tell me you don't have thoughts about what's happening in this country." "Of course I have thoughts," Jason responded, his voice still measured but with a slight tension creeping in. "I just don't think my job as an entertainer is to impose those thoughts on other people." Joy's laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "So you're saying you're better than the rest of us who actually care enough to speak up? That's pretty convenient, don't you think?" The other hosts exchanged glances. This was escalating quickly and not in the direction anyone had anticipated. Whoopi cleared her throat, clearly attempting to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Let's talk about the actual show," Whoopi interjected diplomatically. "Jason, can you tell us about the character development process?" But Joy wasn't finished. She had locked onto something, and, like a dog with a bone, she wasn't about to let go. "No, wait," Joy said, holding up her hand to stop Whoopi. "I think this is important. Jason, are you telling us that you think celebrities should just shut up and entertain? Because that sounds awfully familiar. Where have I heard that before?" The implication was clear and insulting. Jason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his composure. "I'm saying that I respect my audience enough to let them form their own opinions without my influence." Jason replied, each word carefully chosen. "I think that's actually more respectful than assuming they need me to tell them how to think." "Respectful?" Joy's voice rose slightly. "Or is it just cowardly? I mean, when democracy is under attack, when people's rights are being stripped away, don't you think silence is complicity?" The studio had gone dead quiet except for the low hum of the cameras. The audience, which had been chattering softly throughout the interview, was now completely silent. Even the production crew had stopped their usual behind-the-scenes movements. "I never said I was silent," Jason said, his voice still controlled but with steel underneath. "I said I don't use my platform to lecture people. There's a difference." "Is there, though?" Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're perfectly happy to take money from Netflix, a company that platforms all kinds of content, but you won't take a stand on anything that actually matters." That's when something shifted in Jason's expression. The professional mask that he had worn for decades of interviews began to crack. His hands, which had been resting casually on the arms of his chair, gripped them slightly tighter. "Joy," he said quietly, "I think you're making a lot of assumptions about someone you don't know." "Am I?" Joy shot back. "Because I've been doing this for a long time, Jason, and I can usually tell when someone is hiding behind fake neutrality because they don't want to alienate their conservative fans." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Jason stared at Joy for a long moment, and for the first time since he'd sat down, his carefully constructed composure began to show cracks. "That's quite an accusation," he said slowly. "Are you saying that my desire not to alienate half the country makes me some kind of sellout?" "I'm saying," Joy replied with that same sharp smile, "that when good people stay silent, bad things happen. And maybe, just maybe, your silence isn't as noble as you think it is." The silence that followed Joy's words was deafening. Jason sat perfectly still for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 or 4 seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Lower, more controlled than before, but in a way that suggested he was fighting something much bigger underneath. "Joy," he said, and even the way he said her name carried weight. "I think you've crossed a line here." "Have I?" Joy's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "By suggesting that maybe, just maybe, someone with your platform should use it for something more meaningful than promoting streaming shows?" "No," Jason replied, leaning forward slightly in his chair. "By presuming to know what kind of person I am based on a 5-minute conversation about a television show." The other hosts were clearly uncomfortable now. Sarah Haynes was fidgeting with her cards. Sunny Hostin was looking between Jason and Joy like she was watching a tennis match, and Whoopi had the expression of someone trying to figure out how to defuse a bomb. "Look, Jason," Whoopi tried again, "maybe we should." "No, let him finish," Joy interrupted, waving Whoopi off. "I want to hear what Jason has to say about using platforms responsibly." Jason's laugh was unlike anything anyone had heard from him before. It wasn't his usual warm chuckle or his dry comedic timing. This was something else entirely. "Platforms," he repeated slowly. "You want to talk about using platforms responsibly, Joy?" "That's exactly what I want to talk about," Joy said, crossing her arms and settling back in her chair like she was getting comfortable for a long debate. "Okay," Jason said, and something in his tone made everyone in the studio tense up. "Let's talk about platforms. You've had a platform on this show for how many years now?" 25 years, Joy answered proudly. 25 years, Jason repeated. "And in those 25 years, how many times have you used that platform to attack guests who came here in good faith to promote their work?" Joy's confident expression faltered slightly. "I don't attack guests. I ask tough questions." "Tough questions," Jason nodded slowly. "Is that what you call it when you accuse someone of being a coward and a sellout because they won't perform their political beliefs for your entertainment?" "Now wait just a minute," Joy started, but Jason held up his hand. "No, you wait a minute," he said, and for the first time, real anger flashed across his face. "You want to talk about responsibility? Let's talk about the responsibility that comes with sitting behind that desk for 25 years and treating people like punching bags for your personal political agenda." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. One of the cameras had zoomed in on Jason's face, capturing every micro-expression as he continued. "You know what I find interesting, Joy? You talk about courage and taking stands, but what exactly is courageous about attacking someone who can't really fight back without looking like the bad guy?" "I'm not attacking you," Joy protested, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "No?" Jason's eyebrows rose. "So calling me a coward, suggesting I'm hiding behind fake neutrality, and implying that I'm complicit in the downfall of democracy, that's not an attack?" "That's just, friendly conversation." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jason wasn't finished. "Here's what I think is really happening here, Joy. I think you're so used to guests either agreeing with everything you say or staying quiet that you've forgotten how to have an actual conversation with someone who doesn't immediately validate your worldview." "That's ridiculous," Joy snapped, but there was a defensive edge to her voice now. "Is it?" Jason asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like the moment I suggested that maybe, just maybe, not everyone needs to perform their politics for public consumption, you decided I was the enemy." Whoopi was making subtle hand gestures to the production team, clearly trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. The show had gone completely off the rails, but the train wreck was so compelling that cutting to commercial felt impossible. "I never said you were the enemy," Joy said, but her usual fire was dampening. "You didn't have to say it," Jason replied. "You implied it with every question, every accusation, every dismissive laugh. And you know what the really sad part is? I actually came here today excited to talk about this project. It's something I'm genuinely proud of, something that took years to develop, and instead of getting to share that with your audience, I'm sitting here defending my character because you decided to turn this into some kind of political purity test." The camera caught a close-up of Joy's face, and for the first time since the interview began, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Her usual smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by something that looked almost like embarrassment. "Jason, I think maybe you're overreacting," Joy said, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. "Overreacting?" Jason's voice rose slightly for the first time. "Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes essentially calling me a spineless sellout who's complicit in the destruction of democracy, and you think I'm overreacting by pointing out how inappropriate that is?" Sarah Haynes finally found her voice. "Maybe we should take a step back here." "No," Jason said firmly, turning to Sarah but not breaking his rhythm. "I appreciate that, Sarah, but I think this is important. Because this is exactly the problem with political discourse in this country right now. If you don't immediately signal which team you're on, if you don't perform your allegiance loudly enough, then people like Joy here assume you must be on the wrong side." He turned back to Joy, and his expression was unlike anything anyone had ever seen from Jason Bateman in decades of public appearances. "You want to know what I think about political responsibility, Joy? I think the most responsible thing any of us can do is treat each other with basic human decency, especially when we disagree. But apparently, that's too radical a concept for daytime television." Joy was speaking now, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. The other hosts were staring at her, waiting to see what she would say, but nothing came. "You know what's really ironic?" Jason continued, his voice getting stronger with each word. "You've spent this entire interview lecturing me about courage and taking stands. But the moment someone actually stands up to you, the moment someone calls out your behavior for what it is, you don't know what to do with yourself." The camera pulled back to show the entire panel, and the contrast was stark. Jason, who had arrived looking relaxed and professional, now sat forward in his chair, fully engaged and clearly not backing down. Joy, who had started the interview with complete confidence, now looked like she wished she could disappear into her chair. But Jason wasn't finished, not even close. The silence stretched on, and Jason seemed to be gathering himself for something bigger. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but there was an intensity behind it that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "You know what, Joy? I've been thinking about what you said about silence being complicity, and you're absolutely right about one thing. Sometimes staying quiet when you see something wrong is the real problem." Joy looked up, hopefully, thinking maybe Jason was about to concede her point. "So, I'm not going to stay quiet about this," Jason continued, "because what's happening right here, right now, is exactly what's wrong with political discourse in this country." "What do you mean?" Joy asked, though her voice had lost all its earlier aggression. "I mean this," Jason said, gesturing between them. "This idea that you can ambush someone, attack their character, make sweeping assumptions about who they are as a person, and then act surprised when they object to being treated that way." Whoopi tried one more time to redirect. "Jason, maybe we can." "No, Whoopi, with all due respect, I think this conversation needs to happen," Jason said firmly but politely, because Joy here just gave us a perfect example of everything that's toxic about how we talk to each other. He turned back to Joy, and his expression was devastating in its controlled disappointment. "You want to know why I don't lecture people about politics, Joy? It's not because I'm a coward. It's not because I don't care. It's because I've seen what happens when people think their political opinions give them license to treat others like garbage." "I never treated you like garbage," Joy protested weakly. "Really?" Jason's eyebrows shot up. "Let me ask you something. If I had walked in here today and immediately started agreeing with every political position you hold, would you have called me a coward?" Joy hesitated. "That's not the same thing." "Isn't it, though?" Jason pressed. "Because it seems to me like the only way to avoid your contempt is to echo your exact opinions back to you. And if that's not treating someone like garbage, I don't know what is." The audience was completely silent now. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Everyone seemed to understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. You know what the really sad part is, Joy? I actually respect a lot of your political positions. I think you're passionate about things that matter, and I think you genuinely want to make the world better. But you've become so convinced that anyone who doesn't perform their politics exactly the way you want them to must be the enemy, that you've lost the ability to have a normal human conversation. Joy's face was flushed now, and she was clearly struggling to find a response. And that, Jason continued, is why I don't do political commentary. Not because I don't have opinions, but because I refuse to participate in this kind of toxic environment where disagreement equals moral failure. I don't think disagreement equals moral failure, Joy said, but her voice was barely above a whisper. No? Jason asked. Then why did you spend the first half of this interview trying to make me confess my political sins? Why did you call me a coward for not wanting to turn every conversation into a political battlefield? For the first time in the entire interview, Joy had no response. She sat there, staring at Jason, clearly realizing that she had badly miscalculated. You want to talk about using platforms responsibly? Jason asked, his voice getting stronger. How about using your platform to actually listen to people instead of just waiting for your turn to attack them? How about treating your guests like human beings instead of political props? Sunny Hostin finally spoke up, her voice careful and measured. Jason, I think what Joy was trying to... I know what Joy was trying to do, Jason interrupted, not unkindly, but firmly. She was trying to get me to say something controversial that would create a viral moment. She was trying to turn this interview into content for social media, and when I wouldn't play along, she decided to make me the villain. He looked directly at Joy again, and his disappointment was palpable. The thing is, Joy, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been on hundreds of shows, talked to thousands of interviewers, and I can usually tell when someone is more interested in creating drama than having a conversation. But I thought The View was better than that. I thought you were better than that. Joy finally found her voice again, but it was shaky. I was just trying to... You were trying to ambush me, Jason said simply. And when I didn't collapse under the pressure, when I didn't give you the reaction you wanted, you kept pushing harder. That's not journalism, Joy. That's not even good television. That's just bullying. The word bullying hung in the air like a bomb. Everyone in the studio understood that this was the moment everything changed. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was Jason Bateman, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood, calling out Joy Behar for bullying behavior on live television. I'm not a bully, Joy said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Aren't you, though? Jason asked quietly. What would you call someone who uses their position of power to attack someone who can't really fight back without looking bad? What would you call someone who makes personal attacks when they don't get the answers they want? Whoopi was clearly desperate to end this segment, but it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone knew it. You know what I find most disappointing about this whole thing? Jason asked, and his voice was sad now rather than angry. I came here today genuinely excited to talk about this project. It's a show about redemption, about second chances, about how people can change and grow. And instead of getting to share that message, I'm sitting here explaining why it's not okay to attack someone's character on national television. He paused, looking around at all the hosts before focusing back on Joy. I hope you think about that tonight, Joy. I hope you think about whether this is really how you want to use the platform you've been given. Because you're right about one thing, silence in the face of wrong behavior is complicity, and I refuse to be complicit in normalizing this kind of treatment. Jason stood up then, something that never happens during live television interviews. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his microphone pack, and set it on the table. I think we're done here, he said simply. Joy looked panicked now. Jason, wait, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jason stopped and turned back to her, and his expression was almost pitying. Joy, the only misunderstanding here is that you thought you could treat me like this and I would just take it, but you were wrong. He looked directly into the main camera then, speaking to the audience for the first time. To everyone watching at home, I'm sorry you had to see this. I know you tuned in expecting to hear about a television show, and instead you got to watch someone's character get assassinated on live television. That's not what any of us signed up for. And with that, Jason Bateman walked off the set of The View, leaving Joy Behar sitting there in stunned silence, her face red with embarrassment, and the entire studio frozen in shock. The camera held on Joy's face for what felt like forever before finally cutting to commercial, but the damage was already done. In less than 20 minutes, one of daytime television's most aggressive hosts had been completely and thoroughly destroyed by an actor who had simply refused to be bullied. What did you think of Jason Bateman's incredible takedown of Joy Behar? Was he justified in walking off, or did he go too far? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable moments from live television.